Welcome back, everybody, to your daily update on the state of the Malazan Empire. And yeah, it's not really daily at the moment because yesterday I did something else, but here we are again and talking about the end of House of Chains. And I'm going to try to fit all of it in today's video, but maybe I'll do another one tomorrow. Otherwise, I'll either start Midnight Tides tomorrow or do something else. We'll see. This is the freedom that I take for myself, basically. Also, I've been lazy when it comes to the knitting part because the leg warmer is still not done. I'm almost done. Like I'm on the other side on this what's it called? I don't know what's called. Like the ending of that kind of thing, where you make it slowly go tighter, that kind of thing. I need to look up more weird knitting vocabulary, which is something I've never thought I would have to do. But apparently that's the case. Well, when I say I've been lazy, yes, I've been lazy. I didn't do much today. But actually, because I fucked up again, I had to start from scratch. And basically, I did everything from, yeah, almost everything of this I did yesterday. So I'm still positive I can finish the whole damn thing tomorrow if I finish this one later tonight and then do start on a second one. Maybe I can, we'll see. And then I need a new project, I suspect. Also, we have a new beer. I have no idea. I have not tried it yet, so I don't know. It's apparently Allgäuer Büble, which is a word for a small boy from that region, Allgäu, that southern Bavarian region of Germany. Although the brewery belongs to a large company at this point. It's a Märzen, so it's a lighter beer. I have no idea how it tastes. So I suspect we'll find out in a second. So let's do this. Sounds good already? Yep, that's drinkable. So now you know all my qualifications for beer tastings is like, yep, it's drinkable. um, it's basically the same when I talk about books. I'll just say like, yep, that's readable. But anyway, let's get into House of Chains some more because there's a lot going on near the end. Obviously, we're nearing the end and the final confrontation or not final confrontation, and it's once again this idea of circles closing or circles closing around Raraku is very, very powerful here. We figure out who who the whirlwind goddess is, and surprise, surprise, it's once again a story that closes up with another story, because that's Onrak the Broken's wife, I suspect is the right term here, who got very, very jealous when he painted a picture of Kilava, and then he got sentenced to die, which obviously didn't happen because certain ritual was performed and so forth, but it's jealousy that drove her into madness and rage and turns her into the whirlwind goddess. So see, once again, one of those plots comes back around. It's that whole circular thing going on again. Also, it adds more depth to the whole character of Onrak, and he has that going for him. Plus, he's now connected to Kilawa, which obviously is interesting. Kilawa in general is one of those very fascinating characters that I would love to know more about, and maybe at some point I mean, she might be an interesting character for that Iskar Jarek challenge to make a 10-minute video on a female Malazan Book of the Fallen character. So maybe that might be something interesting to do. But I need to know more and think more about her. So, what else to talk about? A lot, as I said. We see the ending of Gamut, the death of Gamut. We see the final battle, now that's the interesting part there. The final battle is not that big climax. It's rather sad. Here's the thing, and I said that before. After House of Chains, I just feel really bad. I just feel really sad for like some of those main characters because they're like betrayed again and again. That's sort of the thing there with both the Whirlwind Goddess and Felicin, now Shaik Reborn. Like, I feel bad for them. It's like everyone tries to use them for their own ends, and they're so taken up with their own like trauma and their own story that they don't notice it or can do nothing about it, and they're just betrayed and die. Obviously, the ending of Shaik with Tavora stabbing her, like killing her, is just like heartrendingly brutal and terrible. And if I may borrow a phrase from Sarge here, it's gnarly. But even before that, the whole idea of everyone being, everyone basically leaving her, like, because she's not that, like, here's the interesting thing. Like, everyone was happy to hold her up as their, like, um, pseudo magical leader, seer, prophetess, or whatever, and, swear lip service to her, but everyone was not really taking her serious, and that's the sad part. There's like no one in that, and that goes both for Felicin and for the Whirlwind Goddess. Like no one in there is a true believer. They're all just there for their own motives. And once it becomes clear that those motives cannot be fulfilled in the way that people wish they can be fulfilled, everyone is hightailing it out of that place as fast as possible, as quickly as possible, and just leaving her behind, because then she's just like a broken tool that no one needs, and that's sad. That's just, I mean, it shows how these things usually work with rebellions, because true believers are rare and also not exactly who you want if you actually want to forge a new bright new future, sometimes at least. But here it's just, I don't know, it's just sad. Um, then obviously we have a bunch of other things that need to be talked about. There is definitely interesting the notion of all the ghosts of the chain of dogs being dragged back to Raraku and enacting their revenge on Corbulo Dom and his army, the Dog Slayers, and killing everyone basically in the night. That's really nice because it adds to that idea of poetic justice. And there's a lot of poetic justice being handed out here, and that's, I feel, an interesting thing to look at because it kind of breaks, like not breaks through the fourth wall, but it shows something interesting going on there, because there seem to be, in whatever way, there seem to be ideas of justice within a otherwise uncaring universe. And one of those is that idea of poetic justice, and that we feel like vengeance being delivered, just vengeance being delivered, when the ghosts of Coltane and not Coltane in particular, because he's obviously not there anymore because he has been reborn apparently, or so we hear. But when you look at, the ghosts of the chain of dogs avenging themselves and killing Corbulo Dom and his army. Well, not Corbulo Dom, obviously, but killing the Dog Slayers. And the other big one, obviously, is the ending of Bidithal. And once again, I'm still not 100% happy with the whole Bidithal plot line for a bunch of reasons. But I feel the idea that Bidithal in the end is not just sent into Hood's realm. Like, actually, the first time we hear about Hood's realm, like, not the first time, but the second one, is that there is some kind of justice or punishment in the afterlife when he passes through Hood's gate. And We get told that there's 100 demons, 1,000 demons, I keep forgetting, that will torture him forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. While I do appreciate that, because it kind of shows that obviously people who do terrible things will not get away with that, it also feels a bit like that argument for justice that you need in Christian theology, not only Christian theology, but that you need in mostly Christian theology and philosophy, about the immortality of the soul, where the argument is that you solve the problem of theodicy and of people being obviously impious assholes and terrible people doing terrible things, and getting away with it on this here mortal coil. That obviously, since their soul is eternal, it gets its punishment in the afterlife. And that's the argument that you need. That's the argument that you obviously there's problems with that argument on a logical level that we're not here to to take apart now. Because this is not theology class, and this is also not skeptics class. But the argument basically runs that God is all-knowing, all-powerful, and all good. Then the counter-argument runs like, yeah, but what with all this cruelty and injustice in this world? And then you're like, yeah, well, see, there is such a thing as the immortality of the soul, the immortal soul. So these things will get balanced out in the afterlife, because in the long run, no one can get away with it. Incidentally, those are also important parts of those 5 pillars, or 5 core tenets that Edward Lord Herbert of Sherbury wrote down when it came to the founding of deism, which obviously is a philosophy, not exactly Christian theology. But anyway, the point there is that you need the idea of the immortality of the soul in that, and us getting shown that situation with Bidethal's soul being tortured after death in Hood's realm made me remember this part. Now, obviously, we don't need to argue whether souls are immortal within the Malazan world, because yes, they are. It's a fantasy world. They damn well are immortal. I mean, they even exist, which is obviously something that we are not very sure about in this here universe that we sit in, right? So that's a thing that I found kind of jarring, because otherwise it's always shown, like mentioned, that Hood doesn't care what happens to the dead. So this felt out of character and made the whole thing that happened with Bidethal either a very unique occurrence, or the statements about Hood's about Hood not caring about anything, wrong statement in the first place. I'm not sure about that. It's just something that stuck out. And once again, I feel the whole Bidethal plot line, and there is this video that Ruth and Bud made about it that is very good. I still feel that there are things that I have trouble with in the way it is portrayed, because the idea of whether it is systemic or it is just one man's perversity and sadism is not clearly defined. The idea of it being a that's not clearly defined. Now the question is, should you clearly define it, or is the case actually, with some people in such systemic things, it also combines their traditional faith and stuff with that, like that, with us, their sadistic impulses. That's totally possible. That's the point there. But that's just a thing that I found a bit troubling as the ending there, because while on an emotional level I'm very happy that Bidethal gets all he got coming, with first Karsa dealing with him in a very graphic manner, and then his soul being tortured forever. That's fine. I feel glad about that. Justice has been reasserted, but I wasn't expecting that. That's what I'm trying to say. I mean, no, not I was not expecting that, because obviously I was, because I'm rereading this now. I'm reading this for the third time, so obviously know what happens to him. But once again, it just stuck out a bit to me, and maybe that's just that it's just highly almost impossible to write about such very, very terrible things in any like normal way that they fit seamlessly into the overall narrative. Maybe that's just something we need to accept here. I don't know. All right, so there was that. Generally, Karsa Orlong returning and killing everybody is just a lot of fun. Not in a good way, but it shows that the element of chaos is something that we always need to reckon with, or need to accept and cannot control. Karsa Orlong cannot be controlled. That's the point. Like, he is chaos in a less evil way than the chaos of the crippled god, because the chaos of the crippled god is not actually chaos, right? He has a plan, he has goals. While Karsa also might have goals, for a lot of times he's just like, I just do whatever the fuck I want, and I don't care about rules, and that's, once again, that's fine. Which obviously begs the question whether he is now officially the Knight of Chains in the house of the crippled god in the House of Chains, whether he wants that or not, or if he actually needs to accept that role. Like, is acceptance something that needs to happen? Because on the other hand, we saw that Heboric was turned into the Death Treant of Treach, and he has apparently kind of accepted it, more so than our good friend Gruntle has accepted his role as Mortal Sword. And oh boy, would I love a conversation between Treach's Death Treant and Mortal Sword. That will be so much fun. But yeah, the idea is like whether acceptance is required for those roles or not is something that I would very much like to know more about, or think more about. Then obviously we see our good friend Cotillion take a rather active role. I mean, we saw him before on Drifter Valley when he was defending the Throne of Shadows. We saw him there taking a rather active role. He's doing it now again, and when he is fighting the ghosts, not the ghosts, the shadows within Bidithal's temple alongside our Kalam. So that's an interesting thing. The return of the Bridgeburners. There's a lot of, that's something I find not problematic, but something that kind of stuck out, because I didn't see any of those moments in any of the previous books, in a way. And those are moments of reader gratification, like obvious reader gratification. Now, the ending of Bidithal is one of those. The death of Lieutenant Ranal at the end. Is it Ranal? I always say Ranal. I'm never quite sure. That guy, when he dies because of Fiddler's sack of ammunitions and stuff like that. That's another one of those. You hate that bastard, and he actually gets it, and that's great. And we see that moment where Hedge's ghost comes and protects Fiddler. That's another one. We have these small moments of reader gratification. These moments that I just found very like, I mean, I enjoyed them as a reader, but they kind of stuck out because nothing on that level happened, or maybe in that frequency happened before in any of the other three books. At least it felt like that for me. There were obviously nice moments in there as well. I'm not saying that, but you know, not on that level. There was a lot of times it was more like ends were rather drastic, and for example, Hedges' death kind of happened off screen. We just, I mean, sort of kind of off screen, stuff like that. And it's like, now he gets his sort of final moment there, and that's cool. That's really cool. It, I, the way I'm reading it at the moment is it's the point where we can, as readers, just sit back and actually say, "Wow, there's closure there. That's great," and that's necessary in a way because something that I obviously also sometimes fall into is like you read this book and you try to analyze it to death and you dig out all these meanings and stuff and you make like analysis of every sentence if you want to and all of that, and you can do that, but it sometimes leads at least me to forget that in the end this is still a book that's meant to be enjoyed on these smaller like moments of closure, of tugging of heartstrings and all of that kind of remind me that, yeah, you know, sometimes it's just supposed to be fun or just heartwarming and nice and great, and just enjoy it for a moment and enjoy the lasers and fireballs, as Sarge always says. But you know, so maybe that's how I can make my peace with these moments that I found a bit sticking out there. So yeah, there's definitely that. What else? Raraku being turned into a sea again. Also, this is like one of those cyclical moments. Apparently, because we know it was a sea back in the olden days, and now it's a sea again. And so this idea of return, of like the I don't want to say eternal return, but because that's one of those sentences with a lot of meaning, like terms with a lot of meaning. But you know, this idea of cyclical change, and Raraku returns to being a sea once again, an inland sea, and even Lorik has his like moment. I don't want to say a moment of like complete unity or whatever with his father, but at least his father saves him. While he still seems to be a rather arrogant prick, he at least takes him home, and Lorik seems to find some peace for a while at least. Those things are add once again to this idea that like a first loop or whatever of I don't want to say arch of the stories has kind of come to a close. The Bridgeburners have returned to Raraku, another one of those returns. They have ascended, whatever that means. We don't know. Apparently, no one really knows. Although I think it's important to look at the fact that it has some similarities to whatever happened to the Talana Imass. We should keep that in mind for later, I suspect. Yeah, we have a lot of closures there. The circle, if you want to read it that way, the circle of the Paran sisters has closed, although that one has closed in a rather brutal way. But it's like they both start in Unter, and one of them goes the imperial way of going through all these things she has to do and sacrifices all these things she has to sacrifice to become the adjunct and go to Raraku to fight Shaik, and the other one has to travel through Ototerral Island and all these terrible things that happen to her to become Shaik, and that those two paths come to that closure as well with the death of Shaik. But on the other hand, the big question there would have been, was there any way to like, what was there hypothetically any better ending for Felicin in there? Like, when was Felicin lost beyond, not beyond redemption, but beyond fixing, broken beyond fixing? When did that happen? Was that like already at the beginning? Was that in Ototerral Island? Was that on the way to through seven, like over to seven cities through the desert? When did that happen? Up to which point would she have been savable in a way that, like, yeah, fixable is the word I'm trying to use here. And I know that's a very, very problematic question to ask, but it's a hard question on the other hand as well. It's like, because basically, from the idea of Felicin Paran having the life that she deserved, that she wanted for herself, that was lost the moment she got taken away to the cull. That was lost at that point. And we might want to look at some point on the idea how much of Tavora's plan to keep Baldwin at her side, to keep her safe and everything, how much of that was just self-delusion, how much of that was self-delusion and was always impossible from the start, how much was bad luck and how much was just like self-delusion. That's something we should think about, or I am thinking about, but we should think about. You can think about whatever you want. Yeah, that's something that I think might help with this like brutal ending there. It's like, is the killing of Felicin Paran, does Tavora killing Felicin Paran happen in Raraku, or does it happen in Unter two books ago? That's the question. That's how I would formulate the question if it were like a question for an exam in Malazan studies or whatever, because that's basically the that's what where it's at, is what I'm trying to say. All right, I shouldn't sound so happy when I talk about that, and it's like, all right, no, that's not how we should do this. Yes, the Bridgeburners ascend. They are now something very, very special. And the interesting question here is, you remember at the end of Memories of Ice, Paran goes and says, I bless you all. And we know that apparently him blessing people has superpowers, has very special powers, because he is the master of the deck. The question there is, how much of that is him doing that, and how much of that is Kimlock, the Spirit Walker, doing his thing. Also, remember that I told you in the Deadhouse Gate situation to remember to look closely at the scene between Kimlock and Fiddler. And yes, when Kimlock puts his hand on Fiddler's shoulder, that's the point. That's the point where he takes his story without asking. No, the question there is that did he have any right to that? How much of that is similar to Treach just taking whoever he wants for Destrand, and how much of that is a problem because how much, like, the one is a god, problematic god, obviously, like all gods are problematic. The other one is a mere human, although a very powerful one, obviously. I don't know anything else about Kimlock, but he seems to be rather close to Ascension himself. Anyway, so yes, the Ascension, will see more about what that means in future books, I suspect. Another circle closes in the moment where Quick Ben comes back to Raraku as well. So we also see the splitting up between that circle closes as well. That starts with Kalam and Fiddler leaving after Gardens of the Moon and going to Seven Cities, and now Quickman is there, and they all meet up again. So these loops close again as well. Once again, I said it feels a bit like a first part of the Malazan Book of the Fallen closes here, but and I've said this before somewhere, that the Malazan Book of the Fallen is not a straight narrative, not a straight story, I should say. Now that I've learned more about that, but it loops, and it feels more like a tapestry where different strands are woven together, and I feel one of them is already starting here, and keep that in mind. And that's a very powerful thing there is with Onrak and Thrall Sengar and the other two Imass ending up at the place where the first throne of the Imass is apparently protected by all those lost children that were that Kalam saved and that are now with Manala and Apt and Panic. And they are talking about Thrall's life story. And Thrall is about to tell that story of his people and his life to Onrak. And there's a few powerful moments there as well, where we hear that when Onrak learns that his wife has died, his mate has died, finally has died and everything, and Thrall is weeping, and it's like, why are you weeping? I'm weeping for him. Also, just for a moment, that really reminded me of that Conan the Barbarian movie scene where Subotai, the thief, is weeping, and it's like, why are you weeping? Because Conan cannot weep. And then I know it might, me having that memory in that situation might actually cheapen the whole the whole powerful emotional impact of that, but still, that's what I thought. There's like that parallel between Onrak and Thrall, and on the other hand, Conan not weeping when Valeria is dead, and Subotai weeping for him. There's like, that's. I'm sorry. This is a serious discussion about a serious book. Nevertheless, that Conan the Barbarian movie is obviously a great movie. All right, what else is there to talk about? Oh yeah, the ending of Cutter, Crocus, whatsoever, and Apsala's paths being splitting up again. That one is also obviously very I don't want to say sad. There is something in there that I feel might be problematic or not, because the problem there is that I'm seeing is you have these people when they break up, they're like, yeah, I have to break up with with my girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever, because I'm a danger to them and I'm destroying them. I need to do this, and most of the time that's just bullshit. The problem here is, yes, she's a fucking assassin that has the memories of a god of assassins. That's a different story. So her not even texting him and just leaving him because it's better that way might actually be better that way, I suspect. But yeah, and obviously Cortillion then gives Cutter a new thing to do in life, which is to be a friend or protector or whatever to Felicin Younger and those others showing up. And I like how these things are set up. It also would work best if he would become more like Crocus again and less like Cutter. So it's his chance to change paths again, I would say, or leave that path that he started out on. Whether that works or not is still to be seen. Interestingly enough, it also shows us some situations where Cotillion, as a god, shows human emotions still. And he insists that he's not a normal god because he's a patron and that has more responsibilities for, thus has more responsibilities for his, not patrons, but you know what I mean? The other thing around, I don't know the word. If you know the word, let me know. This seems to be problematic. Is in there, but I still find it interesting that Cotillion seems not to be entirely happy with just enjoying his godhood and, I don't know, sitting in the Shadow Realm playing with his rope. Let's move on. So that's something to keep in mind and maybe look at later on, because him being on that middle ground between godhood and humanity is a very interesting thing. Maybe he's like a new type of god that has chances, because what we learned is that how gods treat their worshippers or their flock is can lead to terrible disaster. And I think the way that Cotillion is handling it so far might be a better way to do it. Let's put it that way. Um, all right. What else? Yeah, the end of Gamut is something like his death is also super like well done. I just enjoyed the way. So he gets his final battle to be a soldier again. He chooses to be a soldier and not an officer, which obviously, and we don't know how much of that is just in his obviously all of that is in his imagination or after he has died, and we just watch only his ghost making that decision. And that just feels satisfying. I mean, it's sad because he's dead, but on the other hand, it's also just satisfying that he can actually do what he was meant to do, or be who he was meant to be. And that's just a very how to say, a decent way to deal with death, and not death in battle, but just death, a soldier's death still in his bed. I suspect is like this is a very decent way to deal with that and feels satisfying. So that's something cool. What else? What else? Karsa Orlong deciding not to ride with Leoman but doing his own thing. Also, Karsa Orlong killing two Hounds of Darkness, which is pretty brutal. Also, Karsa Orlong declaring that he is no longer the enemy of the Malazans, at least for now. I'm pretty sure that they can jump back on that list if they really want to. It doesn't take much to end up on Karsa Orlong's list of enemies, but the overall way how Karsa Orlong grows throughout House of Chains, from the early beginnings in that first book, which is set further in the past, up to the end of this book of House of Chains once again, is just very incredible, because he manages to grow and become a very smart, wise Karsa Orlong while still choosing to deliberately be a stubborn bastard. That's quite the character achievement right there, and I suspect we'll hear more about Karsa in the near future or the further future. And I mean, y'all know there's going to come out the Witness trilogy, which is all about Karsa. So yeah, we'll hear more about Karsa, and he's an interesting character to say the least. So there'll be more Karsa in the future. I feel like I've more or less mentioned everything interesting, because yeah, there's a ton of like backstabbing and all of that in that night. We have once again that whole convergence thing going on. But yeah, that's just plot. That's just things happening, and I'm, as I said, not so interested in these things happening. Maybe one thing, like the physical death of Felicien Younger, not younger, older slash Shaik Reborn, is like what I found very well done, is that we see that from her point of view, not from Tabora's point of view, and that in the last moment, she is actually returned to herself. So her personality also makes that full circle in a way that we end up with her being once again that now no longer 14-year-old kid, but 15 or 16. I'm not so good with the timeline here, but yeah, and still being like not being mostly confused and overwhelmed by outside circumstances. So that made that whole moment even more poignant, is what I'm trying to say. So yeah, I think that's a good point to end all of this, and I guess I'll talk tomorrow about Midnight Tides or something else. I'll see you tomorrow in any case with more Malazan stuff, and have a good Thursday, and until then, talk to you.